but I think that it's pretty interesting, and that is going to be my personal coming out story. I think it's a pretty relevant topic, as most people in the LGBT community each has their own story of how they come out. At the timing of this recording today, we had the world coming out of the former Bachelor star Colton Underwood. And we all know that coming out for anyone can be a pretty tough process, but also a pretty therapeutic one, as I think it allows you to just be more of who you are. So, with that being said, I figured why not have a moment to share my experience with everybody, and maybe someone can learn something, or maybe someone might feel inspired to share their own stories, or maybe come out, which would be great. So, just to give you guys a picture of my history with gay, I didn't really know what the term was until I would say about like 10 or 11. I can't really recall, but I remember because my parents told me that one of my aunts is gay. And I just remember gay being used so often as like a negative insult, like, oh, you're gay, or this is so gay, or this is gay. So calling someone gay but meaning it was kind of shocking and a little bit scary, because it was like, whoa, wow, like I have someone in my family who's weird or different, because that's how it was perceived to me. So I don't remember taking it very well. But eventually I got over it. I ended up meeting her partner like not too long after that, and I realized it didn't really matter. But I know that it was just something that the rest of my family never talked about. And so I kind of felt bad for her in that way. But as I got older, I didn't really quite think of it as a characteristic for myself, which is actually something that you'll hear about more in the story. But basically, when I started middle school, was also about the time I started football. And football is traditionally a pretty masculine sport. I remember feeling like like those warm sort of feelings, or a little bit flustered or fluttered with a few of my teammates. Now, in a previous episode, we've talked about what a bear is, which just tends to be a stockier guy. And I found myself more attracted to the stockier guys around me, who also happened to be linemen. I played guard and tackle throughout middle school and high school. And for the longest time, even into high school, I used to always feel that those feelings of like flustered or whatever it was related to envy. So I started lifting weights and doing exercise when I was 11, 12, and more so in middle school and high school, just to kind of get into that whole athlete thing. And I used to go, okay, like that guy's big. He can, squat 5 more pounds than me. Well, I'm going to put on 10 more pounds and try to beat him. And it was that competitive edge. And I would feel that those emotions I felt were just more envy. Like I wanted to be them more than it was like I had a crush on them and I like them. I didn't really understand the difference, or even realize that it was a difference. And so I remember, when most of my friends were starting to date girls and whatnot, I just remember I wanted to do it more for like popularity. Like dating girls wasn't really on my mind. It was more like, oh, she's cute. Like I can recognize that a girl was attractive, but I didn't really want the relationship more than it was just I wanted to be around that person just so I can fit in with the rest of my friends. Well, middle school passed. I moved from Dallas to Arizona, and I joined the football team right away, as I thought that would be a great way for me to make friends, and it was. And with the football team, and being at a school that was primarily LDS, which is Mormon, gay people just isn't something that was talked about, or very few, if any, people were out. And if they were out, they were very much the stereotypical, type that you think of as gay, very flamboyant or thin, etc. Not someone like me who was more of the athlete and stocky and that sort of thing. So I didn't for the longest time in high school think that I was gay. I used to get teased a lot though. My football friends used to tease me, and partially because there were girls that would ask me out to dances, and I would be like, okay, sure, like kind of clueless. And they would ask me, I remember several conversations with friends. They'd be like, so and so likes you. How come you've never made a move on her? Or how come you never gone out with her? And I was just like, I don't know. I think I just really didn't want to. But I just didn't know. I didn't really understand how that made me feel. So in high school, I would get teased a lot for being gay. I think a lot of my friends sort of suspected or maybe teased me for it. I don't really know what I was putting out there. I thought I did a pretty good job of hiding it, but I'm sure there's some tells. And I just never felt comfortable coming out. I did get slightly bullied with it within my football friends. So I was popular enough in high school with my football team, and with people around the school. Like, they knew who I was. They knew I was an athlete. I was a good student. So some of the teasing was happening within my friend group, and I didn't know whether they were joking or being serious. But either way, like, it didn't make me or give me an environment to feel comfortable coming out. And I remember distinctly when I was a sophomore, there was a girl that I thought was cute, and I was like, all right, maybe, she was really nice. We were friends, and I wanted to ask her out. But then I also distinctly remember there was a teammate that I just had this huge crush on, and I just could not get my mind off both of them. And I think one direction, it was like I wanted to be with her so I can save face and kind of get the teasing away from me. But on the other side, I just really wanted to be like closer to this teammate of mine who I just thought was like great. And I wanted to, what I thought, be like him, but really I wanted to probably be more with him. So anyway, that continued pretty much through high school, where I eventually just went to dances with friends, had dates, but never really made moves. Like, I had prom dates and stuff, but it was just always with girlfriends of mine. I very easily made girlfriends, but I was also friends with my guy friends. So I fit in with a lot of different groups and was able to get around high school just fine, which I think if I was more flamboyant or more stereotypical of a gay person, I think I would have had a much harder time in high school. And I think even though my teammates teased me, I think being in sports helped sort of protect me. And then that pushed me into college. And I distinctly remember college being like, okay, this is going to be a fresh start. I went to Northern Arizona University, which is up in Flagstaff, about 2.5 hours away from Phoenix. And, I like going there because it was that situation where I was like far enough away from home. And if you've never been to Flagstaff, the topography is really different and you feel like you're away from Phoenix. But if I ever needed to go home, I was not that far away. But I just distinctly remember going, okay, like, this is going to be my chance to be a new person. Nothing from my past matters. This is a fresh start. Everyone's here starting fresh. Let's begin. And I knew that at some point in college, I wanted to experiment and just kind of see, okay, like, do I like guys? On the flip side to that, though, I didn't really have a ton of experience with girls. While I went on, like, friend dates with girls, I never like really had experience like sexually or intimately with girls. So I didn't really know if I had the data, so to speak, to really classify myself as gay, bi, confused. It's probably what I would have called myself, straight. I didn't know. So I knew in college during my fresh start that I was going to try at least being intimate with a girl before I tried being intimate with a guy, because I felt like maybe if I liked being with the girl, then there you go. That solved my problem. I would be fine. So sure enough, I did. I remember going to freshman parties in college, meeting girls. I made out with girls. I, started to dip my toes in the dating pool. And that was a lot of fun. But that to me was fun. I never felt like I had a spark or connection. So I assumed, okay, maybe it was just I haven't found the right girl or the right person. But on the flip side, I was also very close to my guy roommate at the time. And we did about everything together. We took the same classes. We had a lot in common. We'd hang out on the weekends. We were basically inseparable. And I think, and he was a former lineman that went to my high school. So not only was he a college friend, he was also a former high school friend. And we got really close. And I think I developed feelings. And I distinctly remember a point where I decided to make a move. And it definitely made him uncomfortable. And it sort of came out of nowhere. So I totally get it. But I remember my friends at that time. I had some high school friends at college with me, and I also made some college friends with a lot of the football players, actually. And they had told me before, they're like, I had flirted the idea around, maybe talked to a few of them and said, hey, like, I don't know if I'm feeling as normal or usual with my feelings toward men. And they had said, like, hey, like, we used to tease you in high school, but if you're bi or gay, like, that's fine. So they made me kind of feel comfortable trusting them. Well, eventually I did. Told them, I was like, hey, I might be bi. I'm not sure yet. I'd never done anything. They were like, okay, cool. And then it was around that same moment that I made a move on my friend. That was my roommate at the time. Well, probably a big mistake, because shortly thereafter, I lost the respect of everyone. And I didn't know it, but I instantly went from being friends with everybody to instantly being bullied. So not only was I like teased, and it was coming from people I trusted, but I was completely ridiculed and humiliated, and it just wasn't great. Like, I would get woken up in the middle of the night. I had people throw water in the water bottles on me. I had friends that I trusted with stories about how I was feeling. They would go on and tell those people the stories that I had about them. So, basically revealing my secrets and things that I was insecure about. And it just wasn't great. So I was about 18, almost 19 at the time. And that whole saga finally ended with that old friend group basically telling me I was garbage and I was a piece of shit and I should kill myself. Now, granted, that is not what I did, but I did put me in a spiral, to which took me a few years to get out of. And a lot of it was just like, all right, well, being gay is not okay. And probably I should avoid telling more people, especially because at this point I still hadn't hooked up with any guys. So I wasn't even sure if I was. And I just kind of went back in the closet for several years, actually. It wasn't until end of my junior year of college when I decided that I was like, all right, I'm going to give it a shot. So for those that have been in the gay community longer, you might remember about 10, 12 years ago, people used to hook up before the phone apps were a thing in smartphones. A lot of people would use Craigslist, which probably not the safest thing to do. But in a smaller town that was mostly college-based, like Flagstaff, where a lot of people were still sort of in the closet or hiding, that was really the only place to go where people can sort of be themselves and try. Flagstaff also doesn't, at the time, didn't have any gay bars, so there wasn't really anywhere I could go and meet people. So I used Craigslist as a way to meet people, and use Craigslist as a way to sort of connect for the first time with other gay people. And that's where I had my first hookup, was through Craigslist. And it turned out, funny enough, that it was a friend of a friend who was known to be super, super religious. And I just kind of chuckled in my head and was like, yeah, that figures. He definitely fit the bear profile. And I was like, all right, this will work. I can try hooking up with this person to see. And at the time, he was an RA of a dorm, and RAs had their own room. They didn't have roommates, so it would make the privacy and the whole situation a lot easier to deal with. And so I remember being super nervous. I remember going into his dorm room. We had something to eat, and we watched the movie Click, which is funny, which is about a movie where a guy fast forwards through his life and regrets it. But I was kind of in that moment kind of wanting to fast forward through the whole experience, because I just kind of wanted the answer, like, do I like this? Do I want to be here? And we hooked up. And so that was the first time I hooked up with a guy. I had been hooking up with girls in those 2 years that I was back in the closet. So at this point, I did feel like I had enough data to decide what I liked. And I distinctly remember feeling like, okay, so maybe like this individual wasn't the right person, but I did like hooking up with the guy more than the girl. So after that experience, I was kind of, my head was rushing with all sorts of thoughts. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I didn't know where to go because I wanted to decompress this whole thing. And I drove very quickly to a friend of mine's apartment who was a fraternity buddy of mine. Yes, so I ended up joining a fraternity and starting a fraternity actually in college, totally in the closet, which is a whole other story. But went to his place, and I'll never forget. I knocked on the door, and he answers, and I was like, "Hey," and he was like, "Hey," and I don't remember this being on a weekend, so I think it was like the middle of the night during the week. And he's like, "Hey, what's up? Are you all right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I just hooked up with a guy." And he goes, "On purpose?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Okay, do you want to talk about it?" And I was like, "I do." And he brought me in, he gave me a beer. And I don't remember the conversation, but I just remember talking about it with them and feeling much better afterwards. And I think the best part was, after experiencing friends that disowned me for being gay, he was one of the first friends that was like, "Yeah, I don't really care, dude. Like, you're still you. You're still awesome. It's fine." And it was such a breath of fresh air and it was such a change, that it made me feel more comfortable telling and talking to other members of my fraternity about it. And later on, that kind of spread to friends of mine at home, that I either went to high school with, that I still kept in contact with, or just straight friends, or just people in general throughout my life. Um, it was a slow start though. A year after that, I moved in with two friends of mine that I had known briefly, but not a lot. They were just kind of more bar friends. They were not part of my fraternity, but I decided to stay at NAU for my master's degree. So most of my friends who graduated with me with their undergrad left NAU. So I still stayed in Flagstaff to pursue my master's. So I needed a place to live. So I lived with these two friends of mine. And we went to Vegas together. And this was a brand new group. So while I knew my fraternity guys were cool with it, I didn't know these guys well enough to trust them to tell them right away, which is kind of a shame. But we went to Vegas together. And I distinctly remember they gave me a couple drinks and we went and got some food. And they kind of were like, "Hey, we have a question for you." And I was like, "What?" They're like, "It's totally cool, but are you gay?" And I was like, I kind of fishing around. I was like, "Well, what makes you think that?" And they were like, "Well, you're super neat and organized. You've got like a fake tree in your bedroom." And of course, like who has that in college, right? Um, I don't know. There were just a few mannerisms of like, "You're not an ugly guy. Like, but we don't ever hear you talk about girls. What's up with that?" And I was like, "Well, you caught me. Yeah." And they were like, "Awesome." And honestly, living with them that last year, that was 2009 to 2010, my first year of my master's degree, it was a blast. And I'm still friends with one of those guys to this day. He's still a very close friend of mine. I was in his wedding. And it just reminded me like, okay, like I can be more myself. And each step I told people, each time I talked to people about it, it made me feel more comfortable with who I was and helped me kind of get over the scars of the past. So that is kind of what ended up happening until 2011. I finished my last year of my master's degree back in Phoenix. And being back in Phoenix, there's a lot more gay people around. So I was able to like meet people in the bar sense. So that's kind of when I started meeting friends, not just on Craigslist, which is sketch, but also through places like smartphone apps, which started to be a thing in 2011. At least that's when I got my first smartphone. I started going to Phoenix bars, and I remember February 2011 was the first Barracuda, and met a lot of people at that I'm still friends with today, and started to kind of dip my toes in the water of being a gay guy and living their life authentically. And I wasn't just going to the straight bars anymore, hanging out with my straight friends in college. It was, all right, I get to go to a bar where I have a chance to get hit on for once. And that was really exciting. The final thing was eventually getting around to tell my parents. That was a whole other situation. So I was super nervous about it. But my parents and I were sort of kind of just bickering about stuff. And I remember that my friends tagged me in a post on Facebook that happened to have me at a gay bar. And they were like, hey, what's this about? And we ended up this was around Christmas 2012. And we ended up just kind of having a moment at that time of just talking as a family and just kind of debriefing a lot of things that were between all of us. And I think that was just a really good talk. And amongst one of the conversations in our talk was me finally coming out to them. And I remember it was something along the lines of my parents going, all right, so next thing on the list of things we need to kind of all clear out as a family, what's this about you being at a gay bar? Are you gay? Is this something that you want to tell us? And I was like, well, maybe it is. Yeah, I am. And they were like, okay, fine. And I was like, okay, fine. Literally something around those lines. And it was such a wash of relief that came over me, but I think it also was a wash of relief over my parents. I think parents know more than they might tell their kids about whether or not they know they're gay. And I think through that, it started to fill in a lot of stories and holes in my stories about things I would tell them in my life up to that point. I think they were like, oh, like all these things I left out or all these things I didn't fully explain started to kick into place. And I think they understood it. And what I was just really happy was they were supportive. I know that doesn't always happen to a lot of people. But once that happened in 2012, it made going into 2013 a lot easier. And now I would say my relationship with my family is great. And it's one of the things I think that keeps us close together. Eventually I was able to tell my sister. She didn't care. She's a Gen Z. Most of them are cool with gays. And it's been nice to know that if I do bring someone home or I bring someone around, they're going to be okay with it. And I know that I'm fortunate to have that. Not everyone is. So that's what pretty much takes me to today. Since then, I've been kind of like everyone else. I've used social media to meet a lot of different bears and different gays in general. I've joined sports leagues, which allow me to meet a lot of people. And I've just been so impressed with the sense of community. It's almost like once you come out, you're greeted to a bunch of other people that will accept you for who you are, no matter what. And they introduce you to other people, and you come out knowing a lot more people and just being exposed to a lot more. And that allows you to live your best and most authentic self. And I think that's really great. So that's what brings me to today. I'm super grateful for what the young people are seeing these days. Coming out in the 2000s, even though that wasn't that long ago, is vastly different than what I've seen over the last couple years. I was a teacher for 9 years at the high school level. And just in that time, over the 9 years I was teaching, seeing LGBT just being more mainstream and accepted is huge. I remember like the Gay Marriage Act being passed in 2015 just allowed everyone to just see like, yes, gay people are people too, and they deserve rights and the same treatment as anyone else. And being able to see not just girl couples, but guy couples at the high school level open about it and no one caring is just something that I think is great. And it's going to help everyone's coming out story a lot easier and a lot less traumatic for people, and hopefully a lot more natural. So that is my coming out story. If you want to give me a comment about my story, or if you would like to share your story, or if you ever want to come on my show and tell me your personal story, maybe you've got something interesting to share about that, then as always, you can always reach me at thebearshow@gmail.com and or follow the Bear Show Instagram at the Bear Show and leave a comment for me. So thanks for listening to my story, everybody. And I look forward to the next episode. Bye now.